Um, okay, in this one I'm going to just continue where I was at and finish explaining the script so far. Um, Alright, so we have the code that creates new questions, and I showed you how to add more questions. Um, I mean, that's pretty much the code of the game. Here's where you stack the deck, so to speak. That's where you write the questions. Down here is where the interactive part of the game is. And that's pretty much the logic of the game. It doesn't have anything that runs. It just responds to when you click it. Otherwise, it just does nothing. It just has data stored in memory. Until you click it, then it messes with that data. So that's the code. Everything up above is not really real in terms of it doesn't. You don't make anything with any of this. What all this is, it is a specification for the structure of objects. So a question object. What is what does a question have in it, and what can a question do? That's what I define with this code that is inside of this question block for this class definition. And down here, I define what a game is. Well, so all of this code in between here simply defines what is a game object. What does it record? What does it keep in memory? And what can it do? Well, it can work with a user's input, and it can check to see when the game is over. If it is, it does stuff. If it isn't, it moves on to the next question. This is basically so when I do this, like when I say, okay, a game has this sort of stuff in it, a game can do this, I haven't made a game. This is just a specification for the structure of any game. Just like up here, I haven't made a question. There is no question in memory. But if I tell it to make a question, it'll make something with this structure, with these capabilities. So that's kind of what we're doing up here. In order to actually make a question, I have to come to this code, and I have to write new question. That's how you make a new question. Otherwise, there is no question made yet. It's just defined. But when I say new question, it comes up here, and it says, okay, do what's in the constructor. This is what constructs the new objects of this type. So when I say I want a new question, it will say, okay, this question has properties. It has text. And I put in some dummy text that started out. So if you just make a new question, this is what it has. It has 4 options, and it knows which one is correct. That's what a question keeps store of. That's its data. What can you do with a question? What can questions do? Well, they can display. So I can say, my question dot display. What will that do? Well, it will find, and here's one of the places where I have this also defined, but it will find the text box on this. It'll find this div element on the document. It'll find the option boxes, and it will write the questions. This means the question itself, the object. So you could have more than one question, but when it runs this code, it will run it for the particular question that you're working with. So it'll change the text box on this page to the text that is stored in the data of the question itself. And then it will write to these boxes the data that is stored in the option parts of the question's data. So display just takes its internal data of the question and spits it onto this page so that you can see it. A question can also check the answer. So if I said my question.check answer A, it'll see, is this correct, the correct thing for that question, equal to what the user's inputted? If it is, it will return true. If it's not, it'll return false. So those are slightly different because I'm using the term return. If I say question.display, it doesn't give me anything back. It doesn't tell me in code anything. It just takes action, and then it's dismounts. It's done. Check answer responds to me in code. So if I say question.checkAnswer A, it'll respond to me. It'll say, true, that is a good answer, or false, that's a bad answer. And then in code, I can work with that. So it'll spit that back out to me on the runtime. So these are both methods. This one's a little different. It takes an argument. You need to pass it, I guess, a parameter, and it will check that parameter, and it will spit back out for you either true or false, depending on if you got it right or not. So this is just a definition for what questions can do. This is a definition for what games can do. So the constructor for the game, what does a game do? Well, the game, when you make a new game, you need to give it a list of questions. The game will store that list within itself. So in the constructor, you can refer to things that aren't defined elsewhere, because by doing this, you're defining them. So a game has a list, a game has a length, a game has a question number that it's currently on, and a game has a record of how many you got correct, starting at 0. The question number also starts at 0, just because in programming, instead of counting from 1, 2, 3, you iterate items by saying, or enumerate starting at 0. So this is the 0th item, the first item, the second. So 0 is the first index, usually. So we're starting the question number at 0, actually. But that's what the constructor for a game does. Give it a list, record how long that list is, and then start at 0 for everything. There you go. Those are the properties of the game object, any game object. And just like we could make multiple questions with their own data, we can make multiple games, though we're not going to. We only want one quiz game going on at once here. Then a game, you can submit an answer to a game. What will that do? Well, it says, okay, the response, this is basically a response to whether or not the input is correct or not. Well, go to the question list that you have stored in the game. Go to the question in that list appropriate for what number question we're on. So this square bracket basically means, okay, this number, the first question or the second question, this number, take that item in the list, the item in that position. So this will change as the game continues, but whatever it happens to be at the moment, you'll find that item in the list, and you'll get that question, and that'll return a question. You'll get a question for this, and that question has the check answer property because it's a question. And I just went through what that does. We're going to feed the user's input that he's just submitted. We're going to ask the question from the list to check that answer. And when I said it will return true or false, when I run this code, I will get back true or false, and I'm storing that in this variable called response. So depending on what the response was, I don't want it to go nowhere. I want to save it so I can check it next. So I get the response. Was that a correct response? If it is a correct response, if I got true, if this is true, then add 1 to the number correct. This is increment. Plus plus just means go up by 1. It won't run this if response says false. It only runs this if response is true. After that, whether you got it correct or not, increase the question number by 1. Go to the next question. What was that the number of questions. That will if the method of the game. Check for game over. If the question number is equal to the length of the game, that means you've come to the end. So we're going to create a new div element called end screen. We're going to make text on that end screen element, say you scored, and then after that we're going to put the number correct, and then join that to more text. So this will be like, you got 2 correct out of, and then how many questions are in the game. Then I just style it. I make the background some sort of green. I make a big font, white font, center it, center the box, make the box a certain width, then delete everything in the body. So all this will go away on the document, the HTML file document. I'm going to clear it all. Everything that was there, make it equal to blank. So whatever was on the page goes away, and then add to the body this end screen I just made. So kill everything and then put that one in its place. That's if the game is over, it will do that. If the game is not over, then when we check for game over after somebody clicks a response, it'll just say, okay, then display the next question. So just show the next one. That's how the game works. That's all it does. These are just defining a game object, and just like how you just make new questions and add them to the list, when you finally do all that, you make a new game of type game object. So all that structure is specified for this object, and to construct it you need to feed it a question list. So that's what that does. The first question displays, and as you click it, it'll run the submit answer method on the game. That'll check the question, see if it's correct. It'll keep track if it does. It'll move you on whether it's correct or not. And when you reach the last question, it'll delete everything and tell you how you did.